Captain, incoming message.
It was the dawn of the third age of mankind. Groovy.
Hi-ho. This is me, Kermit the Frog.
Hello there.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
Not a great plan.
Oh, for crying out loud.
Program complete. Enter when ready.
Let's see what's out there. Engage.
Hey there, we're those Sci-Fi guys. This is that Those Sci-Fi Guys show. Just two working dudes, different lives, different jobs, but a whole lot of love for science fiction and the fun that comes with. We are your hosts. I am P.S. McKay, just waiting for the drop, and just like Captain Kennedy, his employment is ambiguous at best.
I can't hear you over that, man.
You couldn't hear me. Hey there, we're those
really.
Sci-Fi guys. I'm here, just like Kathleen Kennedy. His employment is ambiguous at best. Let's go.
Okie dokie. Kill the music.
This song is really loud for some reason. The other one's super soft. I don't get it.
Yeah, well, and I'm DT Calf, man, and that song
It's a good song.
drowns you out. No, it's not.
I like it. It's a good song. You don't like you said use that one. You literally said use that one.
Didn't mean I like it.
You said use that one.
It
Dude.
means it was preferable to the other one. It just is.
Christ
It is what it is.
almighty. Oh my
Look,
God.
man, we had a good one. It was going well until it didn't, and it's hard because it took us a while to find the other one, which really fit.
You need to move on, man. Gotta move on. Gotta move on. Gotta move on.
Yeah, no, stop. We just need to keep looking for something that fits us better. That's all.
The last week was pretty good.
Which one was that? The one that sounded something out of 1979?
No, the one after that. The last one we used.
That one wasn't terrible.
That was good. That was enjoyable.
Still, we've got to find something that pops a little better.
So picky. God.
Hey, don't bitch to me. How many did I send to you?
Well, all of those needed serious editing and they weren't repeating. That was the problem. I couldn't download them. Like they needed a lot of work and it would have taken a lot of effort.
I don't understand why they need to repeat if
they
it's
need
just
to
a
repeat.
steady
It
flow.
needs to be a repeating flow. Yes.
It doesn't have to be a repeating flow.
Oh,
it just has to
absolutely does.
flow.
That's how psychiatry. That's how human psychology works when it comes to background music.
Yeah, I don't know. I kind of like things that build to crescendo and whatnot. It's just, again, we're kind of
There's a
stuck
beat
right
drop.
now.
There's a beat drop, yeah, that I wait for. The last two songs we did, this one and the last one, I did that. There's a crescendo. You didn't like
No,
those
there
crescendos.
wasn't much of a crescendo with this. It was just dan.
And then a boom, dun, 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 dun. Anyway.
Yeah. As you can see, folks, we're struggling to find. No, we're struggling to find something that fit. You know, we had a theme song that worked, and apparently now YouTube doesn't love it anymore, even though it did for years.
It affects the usability, the viewability.
Come on, YouTube, help us out, man.
No,
help a brother out.
Whatever. Every single YouTuber has to worry about copyright as well. Like, I mean, it doesn't matter. Like, we're in the same boat as everyone else. We're in the same sandbox as everyone.
Unless you can get somebody to write you your own music. You know,
we did that for my last podcast, Entwined. Actually, let me play that real fast.
We've got a few irons in the fire as we're trying to find something a little more permanent.
Let's see. Oh shoot. Well, I don't have the actual thing, but I can do. Here we go. Here we go. Ready? This is the beginning. Gonna take a moment. It's a video, so.
Around us is wound or twisted together.
This
podcast strives to bear unexposed or entwined as a podcast.
This music.
So much of the world around us is wound or twisted together.
Sounds very different,
right? This podcast
strives
to bear unexposed or indiscernible connections using historical and anecdotal sources. I am P.S. McKay, and alongside Elliot Gladstone, this is Entwined.
Don't roll your eyes. This is Tribune. This is Tribune's best listens from 2016. So it was literally.
I'm not rolling my eyes.
You rolled your eyes. You rolled your eyes.
I did not.
It was published. It was published.
Okay.
Got published.
And?
Well, we have a good ecosystem going.
Remember, I think it was you a few minutes ago that was like, you got to move on.
False equivalency. Anyway, moving on. Moving on. False equivalency.
Yeah.
How you doing?
This week's been a little.
Being real picky.
I mean, we talk about the pot calling the kettle black.
I know. Right?
This week's been a
how
little
are we
bit of
even
an
doing how are we even in our fourth year of doing this shit? How have we not been like rage quitting? Like
mostly because this is what keeps me from rage quitting the job
Other
that pays
things.
me. Yeah.
That doesn't sound healthy, DT. It doesn't sound healthy at all.
It works for me.
I'm just talking about you find refuge in something that you could rage quit as well.
Hey, look, this is like the second longest job I've ever had.
Yeah. The podcast?
Yeah.
It is true. You're right. Oh my God, you're right. You're a podcaster. It's the second longest job. You put that on your resume, dude. Put it on.
I mean,
broadcaster.
Technically, maybe still technically the third, because I was, I lifeguarded at the same spot for like 4 straight summers. But
well, that's going to come into an end this year.
Yeah.
That streak. So come August 22nd, 23rd.
We're cruising, man. We're cruising.
So have we officially celebrated? We officially celebrated 3 years, right? This is our 4th year.
Yes.
Like we're in the 4th year. We're culminating our 4th year in August. Okay.
Yes, we will. We will celebrate year 4, the 4th anniversary in August.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yep. And oh, by the way, we're at 217 episodes published.
Yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot of hours. I was thinking,
even more hours when we forget to record.
I know.
or other platforms eat
I know
our recordings.
Man, yeah, or when the other platforms eat the recordings. It's on there on Yardstream somewhere.
Our YouTube channel has over 80 videos now.
Yeah, it's pretty insane. I was thinking about this. I was thinking about. Go ahead.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead. Finish.
No, I was just noticing, looking at some of our most recent episodes, and just some of the hits are going up. Of course, we've done a few prescient, time-sensitive ones, like our Captain America and Section 31. We got a little behind on Skeleton Crew, but we did a lot of, we've tried to tackle a few of the heavier subjects. Hell, we have more views of Captain America and Section 31 than we did the AI, which is one of our more receptive episodes.
Yeah, very random episode, by the way.
No,
Yeah,
I
I
think
mean-
maybe our most random episode recently has been Star Chaser.
Star Chaser. Hey, listen, I enjoyed that, and I still am appreciative of watching it, especially from a writer standpoint, like talking about how we could have tightened up that script a little bit and made it a little bit more enjoyable. I still find that fulfilling, but I actually used Star Chaser as an example with my wife last night, because she was talking about a book that she was reading, and she said it felt a little muddled because it could have been more muddled because the main guy fell in love with a girl, but they didn't have a romantic relationship, but he wanted one. It never happened. She died. He falls in love with her twin sister, fraternal twin sister, in vitro, raised by another family. And became a movie. Like, they never knew each other beforehand, but he looked her up and everything. Whatever. I don't remember the story. Anyway, she was saying how it's a good idea that he never had a romantic relationship with the first girl. I'm like, well, yeah, that's exactly the point. That's what I said about Star Chaser and Alana. Like, they shouldn't have. Alana never should have been around, because 48 hours later he was talking to the princess, and she was falling in love with him, and no mourning for Alana, right? Alaria, I think it is. Alaria, does that sound right? Alaria?
Yeah,
I know. So
we'll just call her love interest 1 and the other one love interest 2.
Redhead number 2. The redhead princess. That's literally, that was the picture that got me, and I'm like, hey, we should watch this.
Okie dokie.
Read into it how you will. I don't care.
I'm not reading into it at all.
Yeah, you better not.
I don't care.
Okay. You've said that, but you said it twice. It makes me think you care.
No, you keep hammering on it.
I don't understand what you're saying. I'm saying don't care about it.
Jesus Christ.
Rage quit. All right, what do we got here today, dude? This is your suggestion. I like it. I watched it. I appreciate it. Take us out, sir. What do we got?
I don't know. I've just been on a little, the fluctuations and, what's been on TV, and I just decided to watch a couple episodes of The Next Generation recently. Normally my default is to go to Deep Space Nine, which I've done, and we did an episode recently. But I don't know, something drew me to an episode that didn't really hook me when I first saw it. Made a little more sense as I got older, but I did a rewatch of it. The episode from season 3, The Hunted, about what happens when a civilization decides that the soldiers that they create to protect them, they decide to kick to the motherfucking curb because they're not willing to put in the work to reintegrate them to society.
Yeah.
And that, after dealing with some frustrations with the VA and some concerns over the future of said VA healthcare system, and some, again, take my insider knowledge on this for what it's worth. There's concern.
It'll be fine. There's concern, but it'll be fine.
Needless to say, I have concerns.
I understand.
All right.
I understand.
And things like this mean something, because here you have a guy who is highly decorated, and they treat him as a criminal, so much so that they call him a criminal. And they treat him as such.
Well, okay, yeah, there's a lot to talk about with this episode. So why don't we go through the synopsis of the episode first, and then we can pull out the deeper themes of it and everything. And then I've got some funny observations of this episode that I'd love to go through, just to end on a lighter note. Because this can end dark, and I don't want it to end dark. but it is things that need to be said.
The original episode was supposed to end much darker.
And we can talk about that once you finish the synopsis.
All right. So basically, this is a
You're the
standard.
best synopsiser in the business, by the way. So.
Yes, that's true. This is a standard Star Trek platform. You know, a boilerplate type episode where the Enterprise pulls into a planet where, oh, they might be a candidate for the Federation. And they have Captain Picard going down and meeting with the Prime Minister. This is the first appearance in Star Trek of Star Trek guest star legend James Cromwell.
Yep. I forgot about that, by the way. It was a pleasant reminder.
Yes,
I liked it.
Him and his nice pencil thin mustache. So they go, Picard's going and they're doing a tour and they're talking about how peaceful and advanced this civilization is, and working through the flatteries and the whatevers that come with Starfleet, showing up to check out a ship or a planet looking to join the Federation. Happens all the time, and particularly TOS and the Next Generation, coming to a planet and, working on relations, right? Of course, he gets, the Prime Minister gets a call letting them know that there's a dangerous criminal has escaped from a penal colony, Lunar 5. They don't really
Luna.
say if it's no, it's Lunar.
Was it Lunar? Lunar. They said Lunar.
Yeah. Yes.
Oh man, it sounded like Luna. Lunar. Annoying.
Well, that's only when the guys from Boston come in and say it's from Luna 5.
Friggin' 1989, man. Frickin'.
Anyway, from this prison colony, and this guy escaped, and there's, dead guards, and he's evading their patrol ships, and
we don't see this, by the way.
No, not the escape. You get the call that's what happens, and Captain Picard offers to assist.
Yep, as he should.
And this guy actually gives the Enterprise one of the most advanced starships in the quadrant. If you go by, whatever however we like to set this show up as. And these guys, I don't even know if they have warp travel. They're very thin on the details of this culture.
It's very thin. They probably do have warp travel, which is why they would have to have warp travel in order to have the Federation talk to them,
or at least some form of interstellar communication. That's something.
Warp travel is
it's the standard, but you never hear anything about it in this one, right? So you don't know.
But this pod or ship has no warp drive, has impulse only.
Yeah. And then he
very underpowered, no weapons.
He disengages part of the ship, and then they can't. Well, there's no life signs, and then did it impact on the surface of this asteroid?
Goes behind the asteroid from the sensors, and on the other side. This guy gives. Comes out the other side.
Am I doing this synopsis, or are you?
I'm just saying, the engine module comes out the other side, and they're like, well, that's weird. There's no place for anyone to be in that engine module.
Correct. Right? There's a lot of misdirection, right? There's some cat and mouse. They don't really know what's going on with this guy, but they eventually figure it out. He's trying to hide over the ship's pole, which is a callback to something Riker had done in a previous maneuver in his past, which was mentioned in a previous episode. And they go to lock onto it, and they find, look, it's an escape pod. So they beam, although there's still no life signs. Oh, well, because this guy's bouncing off of the Enterprise shields and everything, confusing even Data. They're like, all right, well, beam what's ever inside the hold into the transporter. And of course, security shows up. This guy comes out. His gun doesn't work because they disarm it. And he proceeds to wreck a security team. O'Brien's calling and asking, send more security, send more security. Send
3 times he says it.
Yeah. And he tries getting into the fight, and O'Brien does what he does. He gets his ass kicked. He keeps getting himself, but he keeps getting back into it. But this dude just wrecks the security team, and it doesn't end until Worf and Riker show up and manage to pin him down.
This was one of the rare moments where it was Worf's like brute strength that actually took over and saved the day.
Yep.
But because he's a super soldier, this guy. What's his name? Damar.
Roga
Danar.
This
so
guy
Danar is
is
a super soldier. We find out later.
Isaiah Bradley.
He's like peak performance, like physically. Like
right, but
he's
if you equate it to like Captain America, Brave New World, which we just reviewed, this guy's got a little bit of the Isaiah Bradley thing going for him there.
I would argue, yes. They don't show that he has like super superior strength, but he's like super well trained.
Well, they talk about genetic engineering and stuff like that.
They did, but we don't see any overt examples of it. We just see him being super efficient, which is good. That's
I don't
good.
know.
I like that.
He did break out of a containment beam.
Well, that's true. Okay, fine. Yes.
So there's some, and of course, let's not forget. Hold on.
Hand-to-hand combat.
Let's not forget he was genetically altered so that his life signs don't appear.
I'm not forgetting that either. I'm just saying, but we don't see any of he's not like Khan Nooney and Singh where he picks up a human being, and lifts him up into the sky.
He does throw those security guards kind of around like rag dolls.
He does.
He and Worf kind of go head to head later on in their big brawl. So there's some, and
you could do that with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu as well. I mean, if you're well trained.
But you're also meant to see that this stack of things he later drops on Worf to look, and of course in HD does not look as looks a lot more
terrible.
fake.
It looks like styrofoam. Oh my god!
Which it is.
Way.
But
we're going to talk about HD
for the love of God, stop!
I'm just
stop. I can't even get through the synopsis. I can't.
You're not even synopsizing. You're talking about the HD thing.
What I'm saying, that particular moment, right, is he's supposed to look like he's taking down a significantly heavy portion of material, right?
Yeah.
So we've got basically a genetically engineered super soldier who's now loose on the Enterprise at various points. They do initially capture him. It takes him to the brig. Troy's walking by and kind of goes into the brig and tries to engage with him, but she finds that he's not overtly aggressive, like it's not radiating off of her. Right. He's not like stalking around. He is kind of a little impatient, but he's not like slamming his hands against the wall trying to break out or anything. So she's very confused how he seems to be. His super mind is not,
self-aware.
But he's also, there's a calmness to him and not like an inherently violent thoughts and other things that would radiate off of him like she would pick up in many species, which again kind of confuses her. And they look up his record. He has no criminal record. He was highly decorated, received multiple awards and promotions for this very random, nebulous conflict they talk about. But they find out that he gets he had received some genetic engineering, biological enhancements, psychological conditioning, increasing combat abilities, their strategic thinking, as well as some other things like being very difficult to detect with normal sensors because of the impulses in the impulses in the body. So it's this is starting to cause a lot of confusion for the Enterprise crew. Picard's hearing feedback from his counselor, and then Data begins to engage with this guy because he's very curious about him, and they kind of talk about being engineered and whether or not they should be programmed, yes, for peace and whatnot. And it was very interesting. The guest star who plays Roga Danar, Jeff McCarthy, one of those guys who you'll see in the background and like has bit parts in a lot of TV shows in the 80s and early 90s. He was even the original chief medical officer of Voyager and the pilot who dies.
That was
he
him?
does come. Yeah, he does come back
him.
around. Yep.
Oh, dang. I didn't realize that.
But
6 years later, by the way, only 6 years later.
But what I really like about it is that, like, here's a guy, not a big name, but this guy really owns this role. It's a very engaging role, and you have a guy who knows he's kind of trapped, but he's continuously trying to find his way out, even if it's a fancy looking prison, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's something Picard
They're well
says later.
fed. They're well cared for. Yeah. Their clothes all look terrible, and they all look like they've been through the dust and stuff. But supposedly that's because they've just been through a bunch of fights. So
and of course breaking out of prison. So
yeah. Right? So Andy Dufresne would like to have a word.
Well, yes, but this is like PG 1989, not rated R.
Before Shawshank.
But Picard brings this concern to the Prime Minister, and who says, well, they were soldiers, but they were found unsuited for civilized society, and there was a big vote, where would we pay for all the treatment and everything, or would we put them all in a nice little colony where they can live safely away from everything because of the danger? And the populace voted to ship them away. That's what he routinely says. Well, we had a referendum or whatever it is, right? And Picard's like, dude, not cool, man. He's like, oh, well, this is internal stuff. It's not really yours. Thank you. Turn him over to the police, right? So Picard's like, well, I don't really have a choice. He goes down to talk to Danar and he's like, look, I don't like doing this. It's not my choice, but it is an internal matter, so I do have to turn you over to your people. He's like, but my counselor and my second officer are both saying that you're not an inherently you're not inherently violent and dangerous. He's trying to Picard's trying to. It's hard, right? He knows he's got to. He's stuck in a rock and a hard place. He doesn't.
But he is not. He doesn't have the ability to say, I can't refuse the request.
It is essentially a no-win situation for Picard. He doesn't want to have to do it.
Stewart portrays that very well, by the way, in that scene.
As he usually does. There's a very good reluctance. Yeah, the reluctance was believable. Okay. Yeah. And sometimes, TNG, particularly the earlier years, really struggled with Troy's role at times with the, I sense this, that not as much the actual psychology, but this one was an actual decent episode of her not only flexing her, her powers as a Betazoid, but also clearly the education of for lack of a better term, a licensed therapist, or a,
Mhm.
psychologist, somebody with who's really, I would assume that Troy is probably an actual doctor,
Yeah,
uh,
yeah. I mean, she's lieutenant technically, so
she's a
she's a
lieutenant
doctor.
commander.
No, not
But
in
that's
this.
no.
Oh wait, is she a lieutenant commander? And then
Yep,
she goes to
from the
commander
get-go.
and later. And
Exactly.
oh, okay. I'm sorry.
But that doesn't matter if she's a lieutenant or a lieutenant commander. I would assume that she's probably a doctor based on they've talked about like all the psychology classes that she would, at least you would assume, based on her position.
The idea of
there.
counseling in the late 80s was such a weird concept in and of itself. It was just beginning to become a normal mainstream
Sure.
thing,
And I'm not saying that all counselors, even to this day, are doctors.
No,
And there's
most
licensed
aren't.
therapists and counselors, but you kind of get the feeling that she probably is. But
Yeah.
that's a side point. Just an observation I've had after 30 plus years of watching Star Trek: The Next Generation. And
It's almost like it's brand new when you watch a couple episodes, by the way. Like this episode, I don't recall watching it since like the 90s.
Well,
And
there's
it was new to
definitely
me.
you're gonna have favorites, right? The ones you
Mhm.
rewatch more. And there are others you probably the first time you got them all on DVD and you binge watched them all, or whatever. If it was on TV, I remember BBC America, the
Mhm.
station used to run a couple of blocks of
They would do
next
a
gen
marathon.
episodes. Yeah,
Yeah, like 2 hours, 3 hours of TNG or DS9.
it would be.
Yeah.
It almost seemed like there was they do 3 hours of next gen and then 1 hour of Deep Space Nine every day at times.
Mhm.
But so I would occasionally catch one, and then of course there were the episodes where you're like, no, I'm not watching this one. It's like,
The
oh,
Janai
Code of Honor
episode.
next.
I just can't. The Janai episode. I feel like that was replayed again and again during the summer. I just like more than normal. I can't stand that episode. I just can't. The message is good. The message is good.
They tried. They tried. It was a little
but I
clunky in its
just
execution.
I can't handle that episode. Like,
I know. Right now, this is as far as TNG. When we talk about season 3, really upping the game and almost turning TNG into almost a complete reboot.
Yeah, even the camera work is
The
different.
music is better. The camera work is better. But there's a heater. The previous episode from this was The Defector, which had a
I started watching that last night. I fell asleep. I fell asleep 10 minutes in, but yeah.
that had one of Picard's most badass lines.
One of the
at
best.
very end. Yeah.
One of the absolute best.
And then the episode that follows this is called The High Ground.
The Hunted.
No, this is The Hunted. The next episode after this episode is The High Ground.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't hear you say the next episode. I apologize.
I kid you not, dude. That's 3 very solid outings right in a row. Now, there are some people who take up and down with the High Ground is a very controversial episode for many reasons. It's still not shown on Irish TV. It has finally been shown on the BBC, but that without going
it's
too
not shown
deep
on
into
Irish TV.
Still not. No.
That's impossible.
Not Irish National.
Not officially.
Whatever ITR or whatever
not officially then. But I mean, they've got access to it. I'm sure they do.
Yeah, they get BBC. But anyway, the point being is that they're on a run of and these are very hard hitting topics. From what is the impact of is it right to betray your country, your principles to prevent unnecessary death and conflict, conscience versus duty. And then you have what happens when, you don't know how to handle the soldiers that you created to fight for your freedom. And then how do you affect change against what you might say is an intractable enemy? Is terrorism an effective way to, make change? So these just 3 episodes in a row in the late 80s, early 90s. Okay. And this one right here, The Hunted, covers, I think, and if you read the notes of this episode, there was a lot of people who were now, because the country was now starting to finally take ownership of just how shitty they treated Vietnam veterans.
Yes.
It took a decade into the mid to early,
It took 20 years.
It took 20 years to get an official welcome home, but it took a decade from the end of Vietnam to really start acknowledging the shitty role the rest of the country had. I mean, when they built the wall and the memorial was finished in the late 80s, that kind of showed a late response to the respect we should have given. But like it took decades to truly welcome Vietnam vets home the way they should have been welcomed home in the first place, especially since so many of them were draftees. And even though somebody like, say, Roga Danar, who I believe they said had volunteered and whatnot, none of these guys asked to, have all the terrible things that come along with it, the guilt, the PTSD. One of the things he says in his discussion with Troy is that he has a heightened memory now. That's part of the upgrade they gave him, is he can remember every single person he's killed, and he's like, and I'm thinking of killing you right now, or something like that. And he's like, and
he doesn't say that. He says, I could kill you very easily.
Something along those lines. Yeah. But then he goes, and it says, and that I find that, yes, and I find that is horrible, or
he says something along that line. Yeah, I agree. Well, okay, can I ask you something?
You can.
You relate to this as a soldier, and you said that he didn't volunteer for what they truly did.
To him, he volunteered to serve his, to protect his people, but you don't volunteer for all the horror shit that comes afterwards.
Okay. Thank you. You're clarifying this for the horrible stuff that comes after the war, is what you're saying.
Yeah, the survivor's guilt, the PTSD.
Okay. That's what
and
I wanted
all
to
they
clarify.
did was
I wasn't sure.
All they did was ramp his brain up so that he couldn't forget this.
As someone who has like a semi-eidetic memory, it is a curse in some ways. I don't have a full eidetic memory, but it is a fucking curse.
There are days I really wish I did, and there's other times I kind of glad I don't.
Yeah.
One of the most difficult things that you have to do, right, is come to grips with the things you do when you're asked to fight for your world, right? Or fight for your country, or fight to defend your family, right? There's a lot of things that come with it. A lot of stress, a lot of thoughts. Like, I mean, you see him tossing and turning in his sleep, right?
Yeah, he can't sleep well.
Yes.
He's scared. He has
tossing and turning in his bunk, apparently in the grips of nightmares. That's how Troy gets to him in the first place. She's like passing by.
He's in his subconscious at that point, and he can't control it.
Distrustful,
but it's so strong.
Suspicious, intelligent, emotionally perceptive, fine-tuned sense of humor and irony. He does understand his irony quite well in this. That's very important. You see that. He has very interesting conversations with Data and with Troy. One from a more emotional side, another one from a logical standpoint. And oh, by the way, when they scroll and try to find what's going on with this guy's service record, they realize he committed no crime.
Yeah.
They literally say, what is this man's crime? So, and that's when they do deeper digging and find out that Lunar 5 is a military facility. And, all of this stuff is, they're like, well, I guess his psyche was damaged by his war experience. And he responds that the damage began when he first volunteered for service. And apparently he says that, they tell him that the first drill instructor or military instructor, they called them counselors. So he's a little leery of that. Crusher does a full examination and determines all of the modifications that he's had, psychological and biochemical manipulation and modification, right?
Yeah.
So it's not even that, like, is the initial thought, oh, well, he was experimented on by the enemy? No, his own government did it to turn him into the perfect soldier, and he's got this survival instinct, right? So anytime the Enterprise has to, like, when they're getting ready to transfer him and he breaks through the containment field and ends up somewhere ends up elsewhere on the ship, and then he's leading the people on the Enterprise on a wild goose chase within their own ship.
This is the second chase of the episode. A really good chase, by the way. Like, really well done. Super tense.
Where he's using, where he's knocking guards unconscious and using their hands to activate communicators and
their
other
comm
things.
Systems, yeah.
Yeah, to throw off biosensors. He's laying traps with phasers, and he's doubling back. Although I'll give, Worf, so much of Worf being denied in the Next Generation. Worf was actually pretty good in this episode. Like,
he was very effective in this episode.
When he corners
took him down at the beginning, and then he quarters Danar in that scene. Yes,
he catches him off guard, a little off guard, because he's like, okay, he's not here, but he stays in the cargo bay, and like the rest of his team leaves, and he's like waiting. He's like, this is like Predator versus Predator, really. This is where you get to see the Klingons, like what we're told is supposed to be their finely tuned, combat abilities, and it's a pretty good brawl. They're throwing each other around. It's like strength against strength, and it really only comes, it really only goes against Worf at the end when Danar loosens that huge stack of materials.
Cargo material.
Worf has actually been beaten by more cargo containers than by enemies, I've decided.
This is true. I thought about the same thing. I thought he was paralyzed with a cargo crate.
He was paralyzed by something
falling on him.
Less dense than what fell on him in this episode. Just remember that, folks.
Yeah, that is also
it was like
true.
One barrel in that episode.
That is
one
true.
Barrel in
barrel. But they did say in that other episode, if it was a human, it would have killed them. So they'd be dead.
This guy, having never used Federation technology, is basically waltzing around the most advanced ship in the fleet, using a phaser to reconnect that trend. Yeah. So clearly the Angosians are a fairly, you would think that they were a fairly advanced civilization, hence why they're going to be invited to the Federation. But
they have their value. They have their own intuitive value in a certain way. They're intelligent. They're on their way up. So, I mean, the Federation would want to foster that, right? Especially if they have warp drive. So, I mean, that makes sense.
And he uses
But they fucked up.
Well, yeah. They used this guy uses the cargo transporter to beam into the security ship, take them by surprise.
He made it look like he was going to the transporter room,
shuttle bays,
and then the shuttle bays, and then he was all over the ship. And then he goes to and then he makes it look like he's going outside
Yeah,
the ship
that was good.
with a pressure
Misdirection.
suit
The misdirection.
to go outside to Shuttle Bay 2 or whatever. And then
this
it was
is
really
what
just
Worf,
to...
Right. Worf doesn't buy that, though.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why he stays. He sends his team out. He's like, you know what? I think this guy's been kind of 2-3 steps ahead of us. I bet you he's got another trick up his sleeve. It's too obvious.
Well, Worf knows that there's a transporter bay right there. So
even though it's been deactivated, this guy uses the phaser to reactivate it
which is brilliant, by the way. Like, brilliant writing. All good writing. This is all good writing right here. And then as Worf is actually like, Worf can take this guy. Worf can take him. And Worf would take him down. But it's because of Daynar's thinking ahead of time, where he actually overloaded a phaser in one of the Jeffries hallways.
Yeah.
At a power conjunction, that it rocked the ship a little bit and distracted Worf. That's when he took Worf out. And Worf was on his heels the whole fight. And well done. Like that. I mean, by the way, that's really well done, because do you think you can see an alien that looks exactly like a human take on a Klingon outside of an augment? Like, especially when we don't see Daynar, act like an augment in the sense of like lifting heavy things, right?
Well, one of the things I noticed too is he never killed anyone on the Enterprise.
No, because no one ever actually pointed a phaser at him other than stun. And he knew it was stun for some reason.
Well, yeah, I mean, all the phasers were on him in stun. I don't know if he knew much about Starfleet or whatever, but when he first gets beamed into the Enterprise,
actually makes sense, because he didn't see the phasers. He didn't, or he might not have known what they were, but he got shot with them, and it didn't kill him. So he's like, oh, they're using like a low setting. They're not going to kill me. They don't want to kill me. That's actually very good writing right there.
Mm-hmm. And as you notice, he never, even at the end, they generally don't kill people who aren't trying to engage them in lethal force.
Well, that was the whole ploy at the end with Picard. So Daynar is able to outsmart the Enterprise crew for the second time. And then take over a police ship to go over to Lunar Colony 5.
Free some buddies.
Free some friends, and then go over to the capital and try to...
And here's where the least believable part of this episode is. When the Prime Minister is standing with all of his other ministers, and they're walking around handing a bunch of guns to a bunch of government officials.
I know! I thought the same thing. Where is your security force?
Here you go, Senator. Here you go, Congresswoman.
Yeah.
Here's your 9mm. Here's your AK-47. Okay.
Yeah, are you trained? Are you trained in this? No, I've never touched it. Well, have it anyway.
If you've ever seen a member of Congress go up and try to talk to you about gun control and hold a gun with the finger in the trigger well.
Oh my God.
You know, those people should not be handed firearms.
True.
Yeah. And maybe don't go hunting with Dick Cheney.
Well, never. I mean, no one should ever. I think we all know that. I think that's pretty clear.
But, this is almost like a suicide by cop, right? Where they're
really
like,
is.
Look.
I was thinking the same thing. You're right.
But they break in. They've got the drop on these politicians with guns who don't know what they're doing. Picard's there, and they're like, "Oh, Picard, you're gonna help us." He's like, "No, you said this was an internal thing, so we're just kind of here to wish you good luck."
Yeah,
there's a couple of blasts, but it's like Daynar and his guys. It's only like warning blasts, and there's like, "Come on!"
This picture right here, he's shooting past the Prime Minister or whoever. Like, he's not shooting at the prime minister. And by the way, look at this effect. Like, this is a really good effect. The light from the gun, that's a real light effect.
It is.
Which is really good.
Yep. So Picard standing down there, he refuses to help. He questions the morality of how they've treated their soldiers. Nayrock asks Picard again to intervene against the insurrection. Picard steps back. He's like, I think you guys need to figure this out on your own, because you said it was an internal issue. And, you've got to figure out, you got to make a choice what to do with your veterans. Once you sort this shit out, give us a call. You got this, right? Yeah, you got this. It's like Nick Fury walking out of Tony Stark after he hands him all of his dad shit in Iron Man 2. He's like, you got this, right?
Yeah,
okay, I got shit to do.
You can figure. Well, he needed to go to New Mexico. He had something going on in New Mexico at the time, so.
Excuse me, do we come to your planet and blow shit up?
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
And they beam off. They beam off, and they basically and Picard goes to number one. Are they the Argosians? I want to say they're the Argosians.
Angosian.
Angosians, thank you. If the Angosians are still around in the next week, please note to the Federation Council that I do recommend that they are good candidates to be Federation citizens.
If the Angosian government survives the night.
If it survives the night, yeah. And then if it doesn't, sir.
Oh, I think they'll figure it out.
I think they'll find out.
The Federation will offer assistance to help their veterans with their conditioning.
Yep. Yep.
I'm afraid the prisoner has eluded us, sir. Eluded the Enterprise. It's like I actually kind of a little bit enjoyed just how baffled these guys were that somebody was able to outthink them, just a little.
It was neat to see these peak examples of Federation officers being outsmarted in a genuine way.
Too is also there is, and plenty of people call it out, like plenty of the arrogance of the Federation and Starfleet and whatnot, because there is a little inherent arrogance and pomposity, a little bit of the moral, the righteousness.
Well, that's the problem of not being fully briefed about who you're dealing with. They weren't fully briefed on who they were dealing with.
As yes, they very rarely are.
There is a pomposity to that. You're right.
Yes.
Absolutely.
But again, it's kind of like when Cisco talks about the Maquis. It's like it's easy to be a saint in paradise.
Yeah.
And you're not
absolutely.
in paradise. One of the things I very much
you're in paradise. It's New England, but it's technically paradise. Think about it. You are. We are. We're in paradise. We got our foibles with, how things are run in certain ways and whatnot, but we literally live in a paradise.
Let's call it Purgatory Plus.
Oh, come on. Stop. Hey. Stop. Be more grateful for what you have.
Be grateful. I fought for it.
I know. So be grateful for it.
You be grateful. I did the heavy lifting.
I am grateful. I've never been not grateful. Come on now. I'm on an appreciation kick, by the way, in the last 48 hours. So everything's wonderful.
Believe me,
it's
I've
a miracle.
Been in
Everything
worse places.
is a miracle.
I've been in worse places. And there's a lot worse places, okay? There really are. No matter how many people want to shit all over this, there's a lot worse places.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, I don't think we're that close to paradise. But we're pretty good.
We're closer.
Yeah. There's plenty of room for improvement.
Oh, well, there's always going to be, because what we are, we're human and we're imperfect. We always are going to be.
Yep.
So,
But this episode brings home a lot of things. Now, granted, this was kind of an allegory for the post-Vietnam, how you treat your veterans. They like to play, the Angosians like to play it off, well, they struggled, so we asked the people what to do with it. Do we spend the time and the money to try to reintegrate them to society, or do we offer them a nice peaceful place to retire and settle amongst their fellow soldiers and whatnot? Just by the way, also notice, and of course this is also because it's 1989, they're all men.
You haven't seen an Argosian woman at all. Woman, have you?
I don't think you saw. I don't think there's one at all.
I don't think you have
in this episode.
You're right. That's interesting. That's weird. I didn't even think about that. Holy shit! What does that mean about me?
There was no men, there were no women with the rebels, the soldiers. But I don't recall even seeing any in the government building.
Yeah, no, none, not one.
I think it's just culture. I think it's just cultural bias of the late '80s. That's all.
I mean, you have to run and gun on these episodes. You're talking about $1 million episode that needs to be shot in eight days.
Mm-hmm.
You're running and gunning, you at this point, they're not working on one episode; they're working on 4 at the same time.
I know, at various
things like this are going to happen.
Yeah,
things like this are going to happen. So I wouldn't hold it against them so badly.
I'm not. I'm just kind of pointing it out.
Yeah.
But it is a cultural bias of the time.
A little bit. Hell, we didn't even have a female newscaster in primetime news until 2005 with Katie Couric. And everyone was like, oh, could she do it? And I remember it was a big deal. Remember that? That was 20 years ago, by the way. Fuck me.
The Enterprise gets off a little light here, okay? If they survive the night, but I think they will choose to. It was, I guess the original was for there to be like a big firefight, but again, it was time and money. And they kind of changed it, so sometimes it might seem a little, I don't know, high-handed and a little Olay by, Picard and company to leave the internal matter to so I think it's almost like, what would have happened if the Enterprise wasn't there at all?
Probably the same thing.
The only thing I can think of is that it would probably have devolved into bloodshed because there was just enough Federation sanctimony and, peaceful wisdom that they dole out about trying to find a middle ground.
Yeah, the Argosians were willing to fight against their soldiers and stuff. They would have been killed instantly. You're right. My first impression was wrong.
But I think even Roga Danar was willing to hear because I think he found some profound engagement with Troy and Data. He even acknowledged it to Data that he enjoyed their conversation.
Yeah, that meant something. And by the way, it was intuitive of the writers to allow Data and Troy to be the two dichotomies that he could relate to.
And this was this was a decent use of Troy, okay? Who at sometimes does get shunted off to, Captain, I sense something. The crew is feeling very tense, Captain.
Or he's lying, Captain. Even though he can sense the person. I'm sorry, she can sense the person when the view screen has them. Yeah, when the script calls for it on the view screen, but when this view screen's done, she can't sense anything anymore. It's like shut off. Like, isn't that weird?
It is weird. It's weird. Definitely weird. But That is kind of how it is. This was a good episode.
You were affected by this episode, especially so because you reached out to me, and you know there were a lot of things that are happening and whatnot. You reached out to me. You said this is a good episode. I'll say that.
It is.
You said that, and you already mentioned a lot of why you think so and everything, and they're all valid. In general, this is a very valid story for soldiers that have retired.
This was forcible retirement, which I also understand.
Well,
but,
yeah. I mean, let's just talk about retirement, but yes.
So this, in some ways, this is kind of like you can't just have a service dog go off to live with a normal family. Usually, they're usually taken in by former, like law enforcement or military or something like that. Okay, I mean, but this is in some ways I see some of the things that the MCU has later used when talking about Captain America and the super soldiers. Can these guys live without a war? But it goes all the way back to, something Teddy Roosevelt said. Anybody who's been willing to shed, their blood for their country should be given a square deal.
And I think that sentiment exists for every single war except for the Vietnam War. And only then did, and I was at the Bristol Parade in 1997, okay? The Bristol 4th of July Parade. And the Vietnam vets walked by. I clapped, but no one else did. And the Korean vets walked by. And well, the Gulf vets walked by at the time. Everyone clapped. Vietnam vets clapped. Vietnam vets walked by. No one clapped. I clapped. And then the Korean vets walked by. Everyone clapped. I'm like, what the fuck? This is 1997.
People couldn't separate their thoughts on Vietnam with the soldiers. That's the biggest problem. All right. There were plenty of people who didn't support the invasions of Iraq. Eventually, there's a lot of people who come out and said, well, the invasion, it was all about oil, whatever. But most general populace was they supported the troops, but they didn't have to support the war. And that's fine. There's a logic
for
to
Vietnam
that.
For some reason. The same people that could do that for the Gulf War or for the Iraq War couldn't do that for Vietnam.
It's just shitty hypocrisy. That's all it is. You have these fucking aging hippies who just can't separate the man from the mission. Okay? And it's especially egregious when you're dealing with people, a lot of who were just drafted into it. I mean, here's the thing. World War II, big celebration. Greatest generation.
Righteous war.
All the love, right? Righteous war. Korea. Wait, we were in Korea?
Yeah, forgotten.
And it's been called the forgotten conflict and the forgotten veterans. But still, people are like, oh, yeah, okay. Nice job. But Vietnam there was such a schism in the country.
They blamed the soldiers for it. Like what the fuck?
And the situation, the conditions over there were bad. There were war crimes. There were war crimes in World War II, Korea, the Civil War, the Revolution.
War crimes in every war, by the way. Every time. I mean, that was the point you're making. Sorry.
Right. But again, this was like the first televised war. I mean, TV was kind of out by Korea, but it was not the mass, media, huge. Like everybody had a TV by Vietnam, TV, radio, movies. It was all there. And you were getting live-ish feed now. right? You were getting stuff on the 6 o'clock newsreel. It wasn't just newsreel after the movie.
Right.
Okay, so I think that also was part of the problem. Now you could see it in your living room.
And people didn't know how to cope.
It was extremely divisive, and so many people were getting shipped off and sent up and back and deploying, maybe not as units, but as individual people, and cycling in and out, and just they took the frustrations out on the wrong people. You had people who went and watched their buddies die, suffered injuries, PTSD, which wasn't really, we didn't treat psychological damage to the soldiers very well at all.
You were told to suck it up, move on.
Yeah.
The exact opposite thing that you should do.
There was a lot of drug use that came through Vietnam because there was a lot of stuff coming into Vietnam, a lot of drugs. It had happened there was a lot of problems. Okay. This was a bad situation. And the service members who were sent over there, many of whom were draftees, just had their number punched and they had to go. And they went and fought, got hurt, died, whatever. And they come back, and instead of being treated like human beings, they were treated like shit, spit on, stuff thrown at them. You have, douchey people doing douchey things, taking out their rage on the wrong people. Okay. And you could see it across with the protests and everything. It was a bad mixture. And you have these soldiers. So now you have people 15-ish years later.
Yep.
Somebody going, I think we fucked up. So how do we make it right?
This is the turnaround on that. Like, literally, you had Rambo kind of like the Rambo franchise in the 80s kind of like massaged the American psyche to try to teach everyone First Blood, taught the American psyche like what the damage of Vietnam was to a soldier, right? And then as the other movies came about, it definitely evolved into from what Vietnam did to the soldier or America. It turned into America taking a vengeance against Vietnam or vengeance against the war, not necessarily Vietnam.
So the Vietnam Wall.
It turned into a more sympathetic situation as each Rambo movie happened, and then you have this episode in 1990, January 14th or whatever of 1990, like where it says, "Hey, we need to look at the treatment of our veterans because they've gone through hell to be able to preserve the life that we have." You're about to say something about the Vietnam Memorial.
So the memorial was completed in 1982. Okay. And it was supplemented by a couple of others, the three soldiers, the women's statues in later years. But even still, and that's a decade-ish after we pulled the bulk of our heavy forces out of Vietnam. We mostly, like by 1973, most of the major U.S. forces were out of
Nixon resigned
Vietnam.
in 72, right?
Yeah, but like 73 was like the last of our major ground forces pulling out of Vietnam.
That was the pullout of
No, the fall of Saigon was 75.
Oh yeah, so you're right.
So the bulk of the most of the the rest of the war was still being was a civil war basically between North and South Vietnam, but that was, so you're talking, it's only it was only 7 years after the fall of Saigon. Now the U.S. military was in shambles after Vietnam, a lot of it due to their reputation, due to just how we operated, and really, the entire 80s with the build up to the 80s began a bit of a renaissance for the U.S. military, where they started pumping money into R&D. They started, revitalizing training. You had a lot of people take lessons learned from Vietnam. And then we started to, you had people who were willing to stay in and teach and train, and that's how you had capable veterans like Colin Powell and Norman Schwarzkopf in positions of leadership for Desert Storm. We had a little expedition down to Grenada in the early 80s. A little bit of amphibious warfare. Dealing with some, small nation actors. Then you get Panama, which was a much larger operation in '89, and this isn't much longer after Panama either. And we're not even at the invasion of Kuwait by the time this episode comes out. But, it's right there at a time where people are starting to look at the U.S. military again, our own people, with a little bit of pride and, with respect.
Can I add a little something to this? A little bit? And
Sure.
I don't know if this is accurate or whatnot. I want your impression on it. The bicentennial was 1976, and they had the tall ships come in and the Navy and everything to add a little bit of pride, which, I think the bicentennial came at probably one of the worst times in American history, modern history. Like, we were licking our wounds after Vietnam and whatnot. Watergate happened. So we were losing our faith in our leadership. LBJ was president at the time. So who was it? No, Ford. Gerald Ford. Sorry. Ford was president. My fault. Ford was president. Not going to be remembered that distinctly in the history books. But the tall ships and that portrayal of might, kind of probably lit a little bit of a spark. Mm-hmm. I think with the bicentennial, it took another few years into the 80s, and then everything else you're talking about is absolutely correct. Would you concur with that, or think maybe?
I mean, the bicentennial in and of itself, there was pluses and minuses to it, but it was at a very tough time. The gas shortages, the issues that in the 70s, and really, and you can start seeing it in TV. And I watched a documentary on it. It was actually on, I think it was one of the seasons of the A-Team DVDs, and it was after Vietnam, there was and the issues in the 70s, TV really kind of went a little, there was, they kind of softened some realism, and you started getting more real world things, but with a little, flash to them, like the A-Team and Magnum PI. And these were two examples of shows that were very popular, very action heavy, but at times also kind of light, and their main characters were Vietnam veterans, and they were being shown as sticking up for the little guy, solving mysteries and stopping crimes and beating up bad guys and protecting the little guy.
I got to interrupt you. You're on the right track. You're on the right track. But I took a whole class about this. Okay, you're not wrong in that sense. But the A-Team and what was the other show?
Magnum PI.
Magnum PI. All 80s shows. That was when we started healing from Vietnam. In the 70s, we had shows like.
Point. This is not. This is not your point. I'm not done with mine. Okay. You see them taking Vietnam veterans, very specifically Vietnam veterans, okay? You get later shows too, like Simon and Simon, one of the brothers, also a Vietnam vet. you're going to see a lot of these police and military-ish themed shows that are now revolving around Vietnam veterans, and
All
they
80s.
have PTSD. Yeah, but
All 80s, not 70s.
I'm making a point though, because of
I'm reinforcing your point.
Because of the negativity and you might even call it the darker feel of, particularly into the late 70s, you get this kind of groundswell coming up out of the 80s. That's why you see things like even Rambo, like later Rambo becomes, he's a freedom fighter. Hell, he even went and helped the Mujahideen in Afghanistan fight the Soviets.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I remember that movie. I was too young to see that movie.
But if you watch First Blood, and it's a very hard movie, and this is a guy who comes in, he's treated, I mean, he is a bit of a drifter, but he's just kind of trying to find, and he's brutalized by the police. He's treated like shit. And then he snaps. Right. He snaps and he just wrecks a small town. And he's got this nervous breakdown at the end. And in the original ending, like Rambo goes out in a shootout. Okay. And it's a really grim ending in the book, but the movie, they kind of, try to soften it a bit, showing that, I didn't ask for this, I just went and did my job, and, I'm being treated like an animal. And, there was this stark realization, and you're starting to see a realization by people, even Hollywood, that like, we fucked up. Okay, like we really screwed it. So you get, a little bit of taste of Vietnam vets getting a little bit more and more love as it goes on. And you start seeing movies coming out born on the 4th of July. You see the Vietnam movies that come out in the 80s, like Platoon and stuff like that. Tough movies. Yeah. But, you're for the most part, you're trying to show the soldiers in Vietnam in a more sympathetic light. And
it was a healing moment. It was a healing decade for Vietnam. And even then, fucking New Englanders couldn't even get that far in 1997, by the way. Fuck those guys. In the heart of Bristol, Rhode Island. I'm calling you out, Bristol, by the way. I'm calling you out. You're a bunch of dicks about it. Yeah. 1997, all of you assholes in 1997 on the 4th of July were a bunch of dicks to those Vietnam vets.
Yeah.
Screw you.
Wasn't right.
Screw you all. That's why I'm not there anymore, by the way. I'm in fucking communist California now. So, much better. Anyway, but I wanted to point out. Oh, go ahead. You finish your thing. Sorry.
But this was another example. In fact, I think it was even Michael Piller who came out and said that this was an allegory for, U.S. veterans of Vietnam. The theme of the show was, let's take a look how a society treats its returning veterans, which I think is pretty interesting, coming from probably a generation of people who may or may not have been the spittours, so to speak.
But they were intellectuals, true intellectuals. Like not
LSD's a hell of a drug too.
Well, yeah, psychedelics, yeah. And actually, it could be argued that psychedelics actually probably made Star Trek good. Because psychedelics actually allow for, studies have shown psychedelics allow for a broader range of thinking.
Yeah, I know. They tested them on U.S. soldiers.
And it needs to, and it actually, RFK is actually probably going to explore that too, which is mind-blowing, by the way. Like,
sure.
I think it needs to be explored.
Government-sanctioned drug trips. Whatever, man.
Well, I'm just saying, I think it needs to be explored. I think the idea of psychedelics actually has shown a lot of, I'm actually going on record. I think psychedelics could be a plausible way of treating depression, treating PTSD, things like that. And that's as far as I'm going to go. But I think it's a good idea.
What can be said about this episode is that it does feel a bit of a mea culpa. Okay.
Okay. Can I say anything about it? We've got 9 minutes left.
About what?
About the episode.
Yeah.
Do you have any more to say? I want you to finish.
I have plenty more to say.
I don't want you to. You have many more to say. All right. I just want to say.
But jump in then.
I just want to say, like, this episode, when you think about it, not a lot happens in this episode. There's 2 big chases that take up about a half of the episode. And then the other half is talking between the brig and talking on the planet. And that's it. Like, there's not a lot of... The chase sequences are wonderful, by the way. Like, you see, like, the music that is done, it's very atypical of what you see in TNG at this point. Mm-hmm. It's very tense. It's like, it's very, like, you know, ticking feeling, which gives you the viewer an agitated feeling. I feel like the writers were very intelligent in the way that they portrayed Danar, in doing the misleading acts. And it was exceedingly well done. I liked that they showed that he was a self-introspective person and intelligent and self-aware. He was exceedingly self-aware, which also puts a red flag on the idea that he should be some kind of criminal. To the regular audience, like, oh, a criminal doesn't talk like that. Like, different things like that. I like that the idea was, like, if you don't put up a weapon against them, they can't kill you. And that was through Troy that Picard got that idea from. Like, okay, well, we're going to use this, and we're going to confront them and do that. Super intelligent, super nonviolent, and a great way to satisfy the issue of the plot. But it was fun to see the Enterprise crew get outsmarted. I liked it a lot.
It forced them to have to take a less advanced society or a little more seriously in this situation. They kind of just figured they'd waltz over with their big fancy ship and use their cool technology and fix this little problem that
yeah.
And then they're like, "Oh, we may have overestimated ourselves here."
Right, and that, like in the first chase sequence with Danar taking the escape ship in the tractor beam and just having it charge the Enterprise, and like it bounces off the shield. Like, that's brilliant. That's a very good effect, by the way. Something we had never seen before, and they showed that on there. Like, this is a pretty heavy effects episode.
I think it probably looks better now with the digital remastering. I would assume some of it looks a little better
in detail. Like, none of the effects were redone. They just clarified them when they did the HD.
Yeah.
So
this is now the next episode, the high ground, is another episode where a technologically less advanced society uses alternate means of technology or science in some variety, to outsmart the advanced technology of the Enterprise. Whereas Danar, it's his genetic programming where, like, you can't track him is one issue, which helps enable them to, him to, outsmart the science of Star Trek to this, to the higher ground with this, the high ground with this interdimensional transporter, which kind of just goes wherever things are.
Mm-hmm.
But each one of these shows these advancements is coming with a heavy price. Okay.
Right.
Danar is quoted as saying he's killed 84 people, and he remembered, and his memory has been ratcheted up to where he can remember every single one. Okay. That's a lot. Okay. That's a lot to put on a person. Even with advancements in psychological training and whatnot, that is a lot to put on somebody, especially somebody who was not in his initial nature. So I think the the two main guest stars of this show they really did act their socks off. They brought their A game to this episode. This was, there's plenty of people who have, given, some, should it have ended with a big shootout, which would have made it more poignant, whatever. The fact of the matter is this was a heavy subject. It needed to be tackled. It is still very salient to this day. Okay. How you treat your veterans. When you amp them up to when you live on the knife's edge for a period of time and you come back, that edge doesn't immediately go away. And
No.
Unfortunately, what happens is people get cut with that blade. Okay. We are used to, support, defend, and, even, fight back and even attack the enemies of our people, right? That's what we do. The main mission of the United States Army is to fight and win its nation's wars. So I am, me and other veterans like me, we joined the military. Our mission was to fight the enemies of the United States and protect our people. And some people adapt better than others. It also depends on the kinds of trauma you've received in service. And it is not an easy break. We talked a bit about this with Office Joe. Now that's it's a lot more lighthearted, but you saw the issues that Joe had, trying to transition to civilian life. And he wasn't even, experimented on.
No.
So it is this is not a topic that is outdated. I'd say it only increased after 9/11 and what happened, especially for those of us who made multiple deployments. And we come
9/11 put the United States in a perpetual state of war at that point.
And Vietnam and the war on terror is different in many ways than, say, World War II, where the entire country felt the impact of the war on a daily basis. Rationing, a two-front massive world conflict.
World War II was existential.
Exactly. But the bulk of the population in Vietnam and in the war on terror was not tied in directly to the war, to the machine.
Well, to the well-being of the American person immediately.
Right. So there was a greater divide with your war fighters and your populace. Now, the perspective post 9/11 was different than the perspective of Vietnam, where at least at first, in the first few years, you're like, well, fuck, yeah, Afghanistan, we know Al-Qaeda's there, go fucking get them. And, hey, yeah, I seem to recall Saddam Hussein was a real asshole, so at first everybody's like, yeah, well, let's go punch that fucking mustache off his face, right? There was a lot of jingoism.
A lot of Hollywood was for it, but then there were a lot of beatniks who were not for Iraq. I remember that. Like LA streets were blocked off by hundreds of people in protest in 2003. I remember that. I'm not. Your point is not wrong.
I'm not saying that it was 100%. Across the board. When I was getting ready to graduate from ROTC, we visited a bunch of historic sites, my ROTC group. So it was like 15 of us, like the 10 of us in our group, and then, 5 of our support, our cadre leadership. And we're, Lexington and Concord, the Constitution, and then we're in Boston, and my buddy, one of my buddies, he bumped into a friend of his when we were at this restaurant getting lunch, and he ran into a classmate of his who was up in Boston over the weekend. And he's like, yeah, down by the Common, there was an anti-war protest, and then there was a protest across the street with people waving signs saying, give war a chance. Okay.
Oh, God.
This is Boston Common in 2003. There was a lot of
there's a diversity of thought.
well, there was a lot of really angry New Englanders because a lot of New Englanders were on the planes that went into the towers.
You just need to say New Englanders. Like, angry comes with the idea of New Englanders, trust me.
Yeah.
So
when you get the Northeast riled up, New York, New Jersey, New England, when you get those guys spoiling for a fight,
New England, the Northeast is perpetually angry already. So
sometimes it's just our delivery. Hey, how you?
Is.
I'm good. How are you?
No.
But the fact of the matter is, this was, it's not a perfect episode, but it's a good one. All right.
I would say it's pretty close to being perfect. I'm not gonna be so petty and picky about it, because knowing the schedule that these guys had, this is probably one of the best episodes that you would ever find nowadays.
And it told a good message.
Yes.
Right? Roga Dana, in a pacifist-ish society that the Federation is, to see them begin to come around to, this guy's not a criminal. This guy's fought for his planet, and this is what happened to him?
Yeah.
And now you're challenging, like, you shouldn't, don't throw away your veterans. You train them to be like this. You owe them this, to try to find a way to help them coexist.
Yeah,
okay?
Absolutely.
They fought for this world, right? They fought for this society, and if they're struggling to find a place in it, and this you see, you hear a little bit later, the following year in The Wounded, he bled for his people and whatnot. We can pity them. We cannot dismiss them. A little bit, it's different, but there's some similarities.
Yeah.
Okay. A traumatized soldier, a traumatized veteran. And just so you know, folks, a lot of us did suffer some degrees of trauma in service, but we're not broken. Okay. There are things that we struggle with, but want to be a part of society.
Jesus Christ, I've served in corporate America. I'm fucking broken. No, sorry. I know I stepped on you. Go ahead.
It's okay. Look, what makes this so important to me, anyway, is even though, in like those of us who volunteer, like Danar volunteered, he was idealistic. He wanted to protect his people. Okay. We want to live in the society we helped create or protect, defend. It's our home, but it's sometimes very hard because we have to live such a very separate life from it. And it is painful to see a society turn its back or ignore and want to, try to ignore. And that's what this society did, was to ignore the problem. We'll put them over here. We're not, they're fine. They're going to have a place to live and whatnot, but they're not home. That's not home. This is where you're going. Okay. It's like you do the time, you do the crime, you got to do the time. Well, it wasn't a crime, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even the most comfortable prison is still a prison. Picard to the Prime Minister. Or a matter of internal security, the age-old cry of the oppressor. Picard to, I think, Riker or one of them. But this was, and what I will tell you is the website Memory Alpha is great for like an in-depth on these episodes with like behind-the-scenes facts and some of the best quotes. So that's where I pulled some of my extra data. But you know, this is an episode that hit me a lot more square than I was initially expecting when I sat down. I'm like, I think, I haven't watched this episode in a long time, but I'm feeling a certain way, so I want to give this a rewatch. And
always the best way to watch it. Feeling a certain way. Well, it hit you, and you told me, you reached out to me while you were watching it. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The way I see it is this was a really good episode. It was impactful, and I think it's one that needs to get a little more recognition for the message it did, particularly from the time it was coming from.
Sure.
And the fact that it's one of those episodes that still holds up to this day.
Yeah. Well, I can definitely get behind that.
I even broke out my new hat for it.
Yeah, it's a good hat.
Yeah.
Iraq, Afghanistan veteran.
Yeah, it's I never had an Afghan hat. I've been to Iraq twice. I was only in Afghanistan like 4 or 5 months, so it wasn't as long a time.
I told my wife tonight that you were in Afghanistan for like 2 weeks. Like, or Iraq was your main theater, which it is. But I only thought it was like 2 weeks for some reason.
4 months.
I'll let her know.
In Afghanistan, 4 months. So,
God.
but I was like, rather than a lot of us did both Afghanistan and Iraq. And so I looked, I'm like, is there a hat that says both? And yeah, I don't know. It feels just a little more accurate to say this than to try to get one that says War on Terror.
Do you have those service ribbons? Like, what are they called? What are they called?
Campaign
Operation
medals.
ribbons? Campaign medals. Thank you. I'm sorry.
Yes. I have I have each one of these on my uniform.
Okay.
On my dress uniform.
You wouldn't wear it otherwise. I know, but I'm just curious. Like,
yes.
For the uninitiated.
Anything I was authorized to wear, I wear. Anything I'm not authorized to wear, I don't.
I wasn't calling you out. I was just
but it's just you get orders when it comes to these things. Like, hey, you deployed, so these are the awards that come with, right? It shows up on your personnel file. So yeah, when I went to Afghanistan, I came back with an entire new row of ribbons because I got the Afghanistan medal. We were serving in a joint, in a multinational.
You just call them ribbons. You just call them ribbons too.
But they're ribbons. It comes with a medal set, but this is a ribbon.
Oh,
the award is,
okay. Gotcha.
So like there is a real medal that goes with it, but no one really wears them. You're given it, but everybody takes the little ribbon section, and that's what goes on your rack on your uniform. Gotcha. So I came back with between the joint award I received for my service, and then the Afghan medal and the NATO medal, I came back with an entire new row on my uniform. Jesus. It was just, it was a short but impactful tour.
Yeah.
So, anyway, I kind of wanted to. I feel like at times my discussion point kind of leaves my tour in Afghanistan, kind of at the back, and I don't want that to not be acknowledged and accepted. So
it is accepted. You are recognized. I appreciate you for your service, and I want you to know that. And I think you know that. You already know that.
And it's been very much appreciated.
And I spread that. Around. Can we talk about how this show translates terribly to HD, please? And I put this photo up specifically. I texted this to you. I don't want to minimize the message. We've talked about the message. It's very well said and should be said. What the fuck is with them putting this carpet with this fucking bubbling and sagging on the walls? Look at this. It's a fucking bubble here. Do you see my cursor at all?
I do.
You see my cursor? Okay.
You know who's responsible for hanging those?
Okuda?
The Screen Actors Guild.
Oh.
That's why it looks like that.
No wonder it's shit. Have fucking pride in your work, guys. Like,
no,
what the
sags.
hell, dude? It sags. It does. Goddamn. Have pride in your work, guys. I mean, this is literally a show that was filmed with the idea that it was never going to be in its full 35 millimeter film HD on the big screen. I remember thinking every set was so clean and so well put together and well done. I saw imperfections on other walls, by the way, like finger swipes, like oil trails of fingerprints and stuff on that stuff. So this is awful. Like, this is the main turbolift that they use with everything, I think. And then look at this. This is Data's console. Drill hole, screw hole. You can't see it over here, but you can see it over here. Screw hole. I don't remember ever being able to see these screw holes in standard definition. But holy crap, is it super apparent in HD.
I think those screw holes only showed up after Frakes did one of the Riker leans behind Data.
Nice. That's a nice tale of android assault too, by the way.
Or maybe Data just doesn't know his own strength sometimes and puts holes in.
He might. Yeah, he might. But I saw it on O'Brien's panel too. Like all the same exact screw holes. No, I'm sorry. On the panel in the cargo bay for the transporter. I think they they moved the transporter one from the transporter room to the cargo hold, and it was the same thing, same screw hole set. I didn't take any other pictures because I was, doing other things. But these are literal pictures from my iPad screen while I was watching this. I just couldn't help it, and I also saw blackout paper on the back computer consoles of the bridge.
Oh, that's been called out so many times by so many YouTubers.
Do you notice it now, though? But do you notice it now? I didn't notice it until it was originally called out, and I saw it, and I can't unsee it.
Man, I have to just do a little more rewatching of The Next Generation. It wasn't as prevalent on Deep Space Nine rewatches.
Oh, no, because they learned all the lessons they learned from TNG when they built the set for DS9.
Deep Space Nine also hasn't received a full HD upgrade either yet. So.
Oh, AI is going to be able to fix that. Like, they're going to be able to do it with minimal pennies on the dollar.
Sure.
Trust me. And I'll buy it. I will buy the full HD series.
As you should.
Be done.
So, all right, care to take us out?
I don't know what you're talking about. I thought we were going to talk for another 45 minutes or so. Or we could just listen to this for the next 30 minutes, which I'm okay with.
Do your outro.
All right. So on that note, everybody, thank you to coming for McKay's therapy session. We're here every Wednesday. Be sure to talk and be well. We're those sci-fi guys. You guys keep dreaming. We'll keep working. So long, everybody. It's out there.
And from DT Cavman, salute to all my brothers and sisters. And as always, I'll see you on the high ground.
Those Sci-Fi Guys is an independent broadcast by Alpha Site Productions, produced by DT Cabman and P.S. McKay. Music courtesy of Epic Music Waves and Tropical House Music. For more information on upcoming episodes, follow P.S. McKay on X at P.S. McKay or go to thesci-figuys.com for past episode information. You can now find us on Spotify, so head on over there for our latest episodes. But don't worry, you can still find us on Apple. We're also live on Rumble. You can find us on YouTube with live video podcasts and Facebook. So be sure to leave a like and a comment and let us know how we're doing.